Hey folks, it's Dr. ShawnBaker. Revolutionize your health with Revero. Struggling with type 2 diabetes, obesity, or autoimmune conditions? Revero offers a revolutionary approach to treating chronic diseases. With personal low-carb nutrition plans, remote biomarker monitoring, and 24/7 access to expert medical providers and coaches, Revero helps you address the root cause of your health concerns. Be part of the future of healthcare. Join the waitlist today at Revero.com and take the first step towards lasting wellness.
I had several sets of clothes in different sizes. I just was aware that it was probably going to come. I hoped it wouldn't. I did go on some diets. I did lose weight, but they never lasted. As soon as I stopped, I'd have one small bit of sweet something and then I'd just spring back up again and often past where I had come from originally. So I'd been bitten by a paralysis tick. Over a few months, I developed an intolerance to red meat. So for 7 years, I didn't eat any mammal meat at all. And gradually, I developed this energy that didn't need sugar. It didn't need anything to keep me going. You really need to know and learn about yourself alone and be confident with that rather than try and just copy what everyone else is doing. That's what I think.
Well, welcome today. Today we have with us Jenny, who is joining us all the way from Australia. So it's wonderful to have you here, Jenny. Thanks for doing this. I guess you're going to share maybe a success story with us. Maybe to start, give us a little background on who you are.
My name's Jenny, and I'm 64 years old. I've been on Carnivore for the last 2.5 years, approximately. I was on Keto for another 10 months before that. I've had a very active life, but I've also had quite a few health problems over that life that I've mostly gotten through, but as I got older, they started to catch up with me more and more. A few unusual things along the way. I live with my husband, Mick. We've never had children, and we live in rural New South Wales in the south of the state.
Okay, so that's where Sydney's in New South Wales, correct me if I'm wrong, right?
Yeah, Sydney's the capital of New South Wales.
Yeah,
it's about a 5-hour drive north of us.
Oh, okay, yes, quite a big state, yeah.
So we live an hour and a quarter south of Canberra, which is the country's capital, an hour and a quarter from the snow and an hour and a quarter from the coast. So it's perfect here, and it's a nice rural town.
Okay, so you said you're 64, keto 10 months, carnivore 2.5 years, so started 3.5 years ago or so. Why was that? Why did that happen? You said you had some health struggles.
Look, it started when I was very young. Probably when I was 12 or 13, I became aware that I was, just compared to other people around me at that time, overweight. Not grossly overweight, but I was the biggest kid at school, and I just loved sweets, and I was well fed. It was a good family. They loved sweets as well. And from there, I just developed into being in the outdoors. When I met Mick, I wasn't too bad, but I did end up at about 190 pounds, which was 86 kilos when I was 16 at school. And when I was in my early 20s working in the outdoors, I had a very bad back. I used to be on my back maybe for a few days when it went out before it took about a week to get over it, and that happened fairly regularly. And then when I was 28, or 27 to 28, I had like an ovarian tumor. It was a granulosa cell tumor they found, and I ended up having to have surgery where the tumor was removed with the ovary, and I had 4 doses of chemotherapy. And then after that, I had chronic fatigue for a number of years from that, and also from the fact that I went to Nepal and probably climbed a couple of trekking peaks not long after I'd had the chemo. And also the next year I did like a race series, cross-country skiing in Europe. So I guess I asked for it in a way. But
can I interrupt you? Because you're doing cross-country skiing, which is for those who don't know, it's one of the most VO2 max intense sports there is. It's way up there. And depending how, of course, it depends on the level you're competing at. But were you struggling with obesity at that stage? Were you still overweight when you were doing all the cross-country skiing and stuff?
Look, it came and went. I was never really a low weight. I was always a bit big. And then as soon as I would finish, say, a trip in Nepal or a series of races, my weight would just balloon up again. And it was almost unpreventable. I had several sets of clothes in different sizes. I just was aware that it was probably going to come. I hoped it wouldn't, but I never got really obese because of that. But it was just a yo-yo thing. And I was always trying to reduce weight as well, because if you're an outdoor guide and that you want to look like an outdoor guide. And I guess I did go on some diets and I did lose weight, but they never lasted. As soon as I stopped, I'd have one small, maybe bit of sweet something, and then I'd just spring back up again and often past where I had come from originally. So when I was about 35, I just gave up completely on dieting, and I just decided that I would eat as well as I could and just accept the weight as it was.
Okay. So 35, you said, hey, this yo-yo stuff, it ain't worth the effort. You know, the juice ain't worth the squeeze type of thing.
Got myself out of the misery.
Yeah. So that was 25, 30 years ago. And so what happened in the interim when you just said, hey, whatever happens, happens? Where did that get you?
Well, I stayed fairly high, and it still depended on what I'd been doing. If I was training hard to go to Nepal, I'd have a 6-week trek in Nepal, my weight would drop, and then I would get back and it would go back up again. So it just became part of life. As I said, I still kept my 2 or 3 sizes of clothing. When I was 45, I gradually got bigger, I think, too. But when I was 45, I had some more cancerous or precancerous type problems, and like an endometriosis, and I ended up having a full hysterectomy at that point. And I was again tired after that because they had to take my other ovary out as well. So I didn't have any hormones from 45, and that really made me feel quite hollow for a while. And I ended up on just a low dose of hormone replacement therapy. Fortunately, I met a professor who helped me with that, and that made a big difference. Will I continue? When I was 40, when I had the hysterectomy, I got my left foot caught under some blankets when I was unconscious, coming around for maybe 2 hours. And it gave me a thing called drop foot, which is where the nerves on the front of my leg and foot were injured by that, which was much to the surprise of the doctors who had been treating me. They just couldn't understand why. So it took me 7 months before I could walk properly again. It was the second time I'd had drop foot. I had one dose of it when I was in my early 20s as well. I was a bit surprised in my early 20s when the doctor asked me if I was an alcoholic because I don't drink. But it seems that alcoholics just lay on the tiles and they get this drop foot thing. But I just had it just from normal life, I think. And so when I worked through this, and I ended up with repetitive strain injury in my wrists as well. So I went to a neurologist just for a pre-surgery nerve activation study. And when I told them, they were doing my wrists, but when I told them about my leg, just mentioned that I'd had drop foot before twice, they got very excited and they started testing my leg as well. And then they are calling other people in to have a look at my nerve activation. So I figured there was something a bit odd. So I spoke to the neurologist, and he said that he suspected I had quite a rare neuropathy called hereditary neuropathy with liability to pressure palsies, HNPP. So we sent off a blood sample for a genetic test, and it was proved that I did have this HNPP. So it's good to be rare. So
yeah, interesting. I'll just add some insight. It's like we see that in surgery. Like that's why you take such care positioning patients, because if you lay them one way too long, and you're absolutely right, people that get drunk and they pass out and they lay on their arm funny, they'll have a wrist drop because the radial nerve will compress, or in your case, the fibular nerve or the perineal nerve will get a perineal nerve palsy, and it's right around there. It's right around the head of the fibula by the knee, and it's very bony. And it's a very sensitive one. We are always, as an orthopedic surgeon, I was like, don't mess with that nerve because it goes out really easy. And so it's interesting. And I honestly had not heard of a hereditary predisposition for that. That may be something that's relatively isolated in neurology, but it's interesting that's there. So you would obviously, like some people notice, like they sit on the toilet too long, they're numb, their feet go numb or something like that. It's one of those things where we definitely see that. So that makes sense. So anyway, I'll let you continue. So you got diagnosed with this hereditary nerve pressure neuropathy issue. So what else is going on?
Well, we'd actually changed to being chefs by then from outdoor guides. I just couldn't hack being an outdoor guide any longer with the health issues I had. And so we were chefing at a ski lodge, still very active, still going overseas and skiing in the winters at home. It was great. It was a really good life, and we were both very good cooks. And let's see, what else did I go through? When I was with the hereditary neuropathy, I ended up doing a lot of cushions. So cushions, sleeping with wrist splints at night, and it healed up enough, and I knew to be careful then. So, but I was very susceptible. I weeded the garden. Sometimes I couldn't play the piano for maybe 3 weeks while it healed up. So it was obviously still there. But after that, I had another run-in with poor health. I ended up with an alpha-gal, which means I'd been bitten by a paralysis tick. We have them here on the south coast of New South Wales. And I suddenly, over a few months, I developed an intolerance to red meat and mammal meat of any sort. It would be about
it's
8.
Horrible.
Yeah, it is. That's true. It would be 8 or 10 hours before I reacted to it. And then I would be quite sick, unwell and tired, exhausted the next day. It would take a day or two to get over. So we were eating a Mediterranean-style diet at that point, and I just ended up having to just stick to fish and chicken, poultry and seafood. That was it. So for 7 years, I didn't eat any mammal meat at all.
That would make cardiologists happy because, hey, you're just unfortunately eating lean meat, and that would make it wonderful. So how did that work for you?
It was just something I had to do. I've always liked meat, and I did miss the red meat. I'll tell you, when I first became ketogenic, after about 2 months, I was still on the fish and chicken. And I asked my husband to do a blind test on me to see if I was still red meat intolerant, because it had been 7 years, and I actually started to feel really well really quickly on the keto. So he managed to sneak some veal into like a couple of chicken burgers that he'd made, and I didn't react. So the next day he cooked up a lamb chop and a chicken breast together in the pan, and he presented me with the lamb chop, and basically I'd passed the meat test. So I ate the lamb chop, and I've eaten red meat ever since, which is terrific, especially when you're a carnivore, of course.
Hey, folks, it's Dr. ShawnBaker. Revolutionize your health with Revero. Struggling with type 2 diabetes, obesity, or autoimmune conditions? Revero offers a revolutionary approach to treating chronic diseases. With personal low-carb nutrition plans, remote biomarker monitoring, and 24/7 access to expert medical providers and coaches. Revero helps you address the root cause of your health concerns. Be part of the future of healthcare. Join the waitlist today at Revero.com and take the first step towards lasting wellness. Yeah, this alpha-gal syndrome, which we hear there's a Lone Star tick in the U.S., but a lot of ticks can cause it. Actually, it's more than just that. But for many people, and in fact, I think most people, it's either the severity is not that bad. Some people it's very severe, or it's time limited. As in your case, it seemed to be time limited. What drove you to try keto in the first place? Because you were on this reasonably healthy Mediterranean diet, eating fish, chicken, leaner cuts of meat. What was the driving force?
I was still overweight. I was still struggling with a lot of cravings. I think I probably have had an addiction to sugar throughout my life, and I've always struggled with that, mostly successfully, but it was always there. And so when I retired, we retired at 2015. My husband was starting to do some ultra running, And I thought, oh, that looked interesting. I'd like to have a go. So I started training at the age of 56 to do ultra running, and which is not fairly normal. But I did a few races. I had a few successes. I did a 10K in Hawaii, which was great. I came first in my age group, and I did a few more short races, and then I thought I'd do a marathon. So I did a marathon in our winter in about July. It was the first year of COVID, and I had the most amazing experience. I just got stiffer and stiffer through the whole race. I was eating sugars, as you do in a race like that, to keep your energy up over the whole distance. It was 7 hours for me. And by the time I got back to the car, not only could I barely walk, but I had to use my hands to get along the edge of the car to sit in the car to get home. Obviously, it wasn't safe that I drove either. But when I got home, I started to think about being so stiff. And I'd had a lot of food issues over the years with what seemed like intolerances but wasn't definite. And I came online, I came across just a person who was doing this primal thing, and he had a 2-week food test to see if you were insulin resistant. So I said to Mick, there's nothing going on, it's COVID, I might do this for 2 weeks and see how I go. So I did that 2-week food test, and boy, was that interesting. It brought up some really amazing withdrawal symptoms. I had nausea, fatigue, brain fog, the whole list. And then after about 8 days, it cleared, and suddenly I felt great. And I hadn't felt that good for a very, very long time. And I just understood then what the food I'd been eating had done to me. So I just decided to stay on that diet from then on, really. And even though so that's how I got onto keto. And then I did 10 months of that. So would you like me to continue telling where I went from there?
Yeah, sure. So how did that impact your weight, your appetite, your sugar cravings, that type of stuff?
Well, the weight fell off me, really. I didn't do anything. I just ate, and it just fell away. So I dropped down. I was probably around 76 kilos when I started the keto, and I ended up probably around 62 kilos. So I'd lost about 14 over that 10 months. It was effortless. But I still was having some cravings, and I still had times when I would have good days and bad days. It seemed to be set off by some kind of food or combination of food, and I couldn't pinpoint what the foods were specifically. So I just decided that I'd heard about carnivore by then. I'd heard about from you and from several other people in the carnivore. I'd seen the YouTube clips and found it interesting. I just decided that was the best time to cut out all foods that seemed to be a problem and just go really simple, go to carnivore, see what happened and see if it helped. So that's what I did. And that was 2.25 years or more ago now.
Okay, so you decide you're going to jump in finally, and how did your transition go? How did you start?
Well, it was worse than the withdrawal symptoms I had with the keto. It just, again, I had nausea and brain fog, and I ended up with a very bad itchy rash on my back with lumps under the skin. But again, after about 8 or 9 days, it cleared, except for the rash.
Let me just interrupt you before you continue. What were you eating like at the end of the ketogenic diet right before you transitioned into carnivore? What was it? What were you consuming?
I was pretty clean. By then I was only doing 20 grams of carbs a day on average or less. Every time I reduced my carbs, I felt better on the keto. And I was eating a few above ground vegetables, no fruit. I hadn't had fruit for the 10 months. I was still having some dairy, like hard cheese, I knew that creams, milks and cream cheeses were a problem for me. a few nuts. I was having some nuts, almonds and a few things like that. So it was pretty clean. I wasn't having any kind of bread substitutes or flours like that. Avocados and just a few vegetables like that. So
Okay.
yeah,
So vegetables, a few nuts, a little bit of dairy, and then meat, basically.
yeah, and meat,
Okay.
meats. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Okay. So you went headaches, not tired, fatigue, brain fog, got a rash. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're 8 days in, you still got the rash. Now what happens?
Well, the whole thing cleared again, except for the rash. I just felt wonderful. And again, I decided, well, if that's carnivore, I'm going to stay on carnivore. So from then on, I was carnivore. We were just heading to France. We had 2 months there. We were training for some races at the end of the time in France in the UTMB series. And it just seemed a really logical thing to do in Europe. So while I was in Europe, I was pretty much carnivore. I had the odd bit of avocado or the odd bit of zucchini or courgette. But really, when I had those, I didn't feel as good. I think it takes you a while to just believe that taking all the vegetables that you're told are good for you out of your diet is actually better for you than eating them. So there was that sort of mental transition. Often it seems to come after the physical. I do the physical first and find it works, and then I have to mentally transit. So, but I had a great race, went well.
You tell me that's, what is it, Ultra Trail to Mount Blanc or something like that. I think that's what it stands for. But that's a pretty serious thing, because you said you had to stop doing the hiking and stuff and become a cook because your health was too bad. So are you saying that by going keto and in carnivore, your health improved enough to where you're able to race again? Is that a fair assessment?
I have always done outdoor activities, and I continued to do that, but often it left me very fatigued. Even in the years before keto, I would do the activities because I enjoyed them, but it would leave me tired or achy. But once I was on the keto, and especially once I was on the carnivore, I wasn't as achy, I didn't get as tired, and gradually I developed this energy that didn't need sugar, it didn't need anything to keep me going. I would just go through and feel good. And I think those things came from being keto and carnivore. So I was able to increase the amount of exercise I was doing without any detrimental effects to how I felt for the rest of the day or any kind of joint issues. And I noticed I suddenly didn't have joint aches and pains, and my nerves that were so damaged by the hereditary thing I had were suddenly a lot better. I wasn't getting those injuries that I was getting before. So, and since I've been on carnivore, I've been able to train and just increase the amount of distance and mileage I've been doing. So yes, I think carnivore's been very effective in that way.
What about, because you said you stopped doing the guiding, became a chef. Now, obviously, if you're a chef, you can still make wonderful foods on carnivore, but has that been something you're like, what do I do now? Or are you still using those chef skills because I eat carnivore, my repertoire is pretty thin. I don't have to do much. It's like cook a steak every day over and over again. So I don't, there's other things I occasionally make, but generally, so how do your thoughts around being a foodie and dealing with carnivore?
Yes, look, it changed everything. I don't grow vegetables in the garden anymore unless I want to give them away to the neighbours.
You want to poison the neighbours, huh?
Yeah, yes. They seem to like them. But when I stopped eating vegetables and fruit altogether, or even during keto, I just stopped thinking about food. I didn't have to think about food. I know how to make a good steak. I know how to make eggs many different ways. Every time I used to cook, I was the dessert queen. I made very nice desserts, homemade. People loved them. But every time I even just looked at those desserts, you'd have to try a bit. I put on weight. It was kind of like just look at it. And these days I think even if I just cook a dessert and it's not for myself, I don't want to be involved with that. So now I just cook what I eat. And I enjoy very simple foods and simple cooking. So,
You mentioned, I think you mentioned your husband. Maybe did he join you on this journey? I can't remember what you said.
Yes, I was only keto for maybe 2 or 3 weeks. I think he didn't he wasn't that impressed with the no vegetables, no fruit, because he's always been a very healthy person as well, or the reduced vegetables above ground only and no fruit. It took him a little while, but as soon as he saw how much of a difference I got in my life from that and how much I had changed, he wanted to do it too. So after about 2 or 3 weeks, he had a go as well, and he got going with it, and he's been on that ever since as well. He's mostly carnivore, but we've had a different journey. I have to abstain completely from anything that triggers me. So I don't eat dairy because just the smallest taste of any kind of dairy, including butter, will trigger me. I don't eat vegetables or any kind of fruit for the same reason. Anything sweet, even the smallest amount, will just trigger me. And sometimes it takes me a week to get over that, to get through cravings and not feeling well in myself, and then feeling back to being calm and carnivore again. Whereas my husband, he cycles through carbohydrates. So he'll have a bit of berries and yogurt in the evening. He'll eat one or two of the zucchinis occasionally, well cooked. He has the odd bit of rice occasionally if he feels he needs it and he's training hard. So this is where the power of being different comes in. You really need to know and learn about yourself alone and be confident with that rather than try and just copy what everyone else is doing. That's what I think.
You mentioned it changed you in a number of ways. Obviously, you said you've lost weight. This might help the nerve issue you have. What are the other things have you noticed just in general about your health?
Well, first of all, when I went on to carnivore, my weight dropped to 56 kilos. But since then...
Was that the lightest you've been as an adult, maybe?
Yeah, yes, it was. Lightest I'd been since before my teens, actually. But after that, when my weight stabilized on carnivore, which was the first thing. And then I've put on maybe another 3 kilos of muscle. I've developed. I'm still lean. I'm still not quite as small as that, but much the same size in my clothing, but I've put on muscle. I can, especially in my upper body, I think I was quite a bit scrawny in my upper body because I focus mainly on training for my legs and running but skiing, but I've put on muscle. I think my mind is just calmer and more positive. I don't have cravings, and that's the cravings and the thinking about food, planning food, not wanting to eat it, wanting to eat it. It's just so time consuming in your life. And when I'm on carnivore, that's gone. I ask, we say, well, what are we going to have tonight? We'll pull it out of the freezer. What are we going to have in the morning? We'll pull that out of the freezer. Day's done. We'll just have that defrosted, cook it in the evening, and then it's done again. So I don't have to think about food, and that's great, which is another answer to your chefing question. I had to think about food all the time. I've got the thing on my back's cleared up. My skin's better. My teeth are better. My nails grow quickly. I don't have the joint aches and pains. Even after I do 100-kilometre long races now. I do maybe 3 or 4 a year. And I just recover so quickly from the racing. I don't get the joint aches and pains. My nerves are better. I think just also my eyesight. When I went to have my eyes tested not long after I started on the keto, and then I've been back since the carnivore, and he was very surprised that my eyesight, not only had it changed, but it has improved a bit. I haven't had to change my glasses prescription since I started, really. So, and I can read quite happily now without using glasses most of the time. I think I had actually reflux as well. I had some quite difficult times with reflux before I began keto, which is one of the reasons I started. And it's gone. It went completely, quite quickly, maybe within the first 3 weeks. So Yeah, just better overall.
What do you know? I assume it's not too dissimilar to the U.S. as far as what the carnivore diet might look like in Australia. But is it anything special? Eating a lot of kangaroo? Or probably not so much. But what do you? What does a typical like week of eating look like for you guys?
Well, for me personally, we eat more lamb here. We're very big
Mm.
on lamb, and especially the area I live in is a lamb and beef producing area, as well as a wool producing area. And lamb's very clean meat here. It's always fed, grass fed. So we eat lamb. I eat 2 meals a day. I eat around 9. I like to eat before I train. I don't fast at all. So I eat about 9, and then we will eat usually not until about 4 or 5 in the afternoon, and that's it till the next day. Occasionally, if I'm training hard or if I've been stressed by something, I might have a middle of the day meal, which will be a small meal, maybe some canned salmon and a bit of fat or something with it. I am very simple. It's very simple. It's just meat, some with eggs, and some seafood. Occasionally we'll have chicken. I quite like pork because of the fat in the pork, but I found within the last 3 months that I can't eat a lot of fat in my diet, so I won't eat anything else like that. When we go overseas, we've just come back from 2 weeks in Thailand. There was a 100K race we did there. I carry onto the plane, I carry boiled eggs, I carry some cooked cold meat, I carry canned fish, because anywhere from Australia it's at least 10 hours, and we often go to Europe and it's 24 or more hours and I need to eat. So that's it. Like I said, my husband will have a few berries and yogurt after meals.
You said you're kind of in rural New South Wales, obviously several hours away from, well, at least a few hours away from major metropolitan areas. Are you completely isolated with carnivore by yourself out there? And I know there's a number of people in Australia doing it. I know a lot of them, but is there a bit of a community that you have locally too, or is it just you and your husband and everybody else around you thinks you're crazy?
No one that I've met here. Yes, people think I'm crazy. It is very unusual for the locals to only eat meat and eggs like that. My family have found it a bit challenging. There was a good bit of pushback from that. Only my sister lives here, my brother and my mother and that live on the coast. But my friends, they tolerate it. They look at you like you're a bit crazy. I would like to see some people around me just try it, because I can see where it would help them with their health. But I've learned that you don't recommend it to people because they think maybe it's a cult and you're strange and you're trying to change them, or you're mad. You're eating this stuff, it's going to kill you in the end. You're going to die of heart problems and constipation, and how can you possibly go to the toilet? So I try not to tell people. Some of my acquaintances and friends know, but they've also seen what happened to me. But it's interesting, people who understand what's happened to me and how I've lost weight and I feel better still will say to you, but I like my fruit and vegetables. And at that point, I realised that no longer are they able to say, I haven't been able, it's just my genetics, I can't lose weight. At that point, they've made a mental choice then not to lose weight. And I find that, and to go onto the carnivore diet, and I find that very interesting. But no one here much is carnivore.
What about the other end of the spectrum? Because there's obviously people that do fully plant-based, some vegans. I know that in Australia there's some outspoken vegans. Is that common where you're at as well? I would imagine that's not that common either in rural Australia. Maybe it is. I don't know.
No, you're right. If they are, they're not radicalised, or they're not showing it in public because it's a beef and sheep growing area. It's not politically correct, and it wouldn't be thought that well of. The only thing about rural New South Wales and Australia is that people in the rural areas as a whole are probably less healthy than people who live probably in the eastern ocean side, more expensive suburbs of Sydney and the coast, I think they do less exercise. They're surrounded by the outdoors. Why do they have to go and then run in the outdoors or walk in the outdoors? There are people, of course, who exercise, but I don't think many people are vegetarians. I've met a few around town. They're usually younger. I can see issues that they have, like one lady who was a dentist was a vegetarian, and I could see where her hairline was starting to recede and fall out. And what can you say? She seemed very dedicated. So, yeah. My doctor is on side. She's been very good. So.
Yeah, that is something that a lot of people don't realize. A lot of times you look at urban populations and they have less obesity than some of these rural populations. That holds true in the United States as well.
That's
And
true.
there's many reasons for that, of course. You'd mentioned some of your friends saying, "Oh my gosh, you're going to get constipation and all that stuff. You're going to die of constipation, whatever." Of course, it hasn't happened. Or,
Not yet.
How has your digestive health been since you've gone to this diet with no fiber? Oh my gosh, where's the fiber at? How's your digestive health been?
Look, when I ate fibre, I had some digestive problems, some constipation. It would come and go. Still on the ketogenic diet with some vegetables, it would still come and go a bit. Constipation was there. As soon as I stopped eating the vegetables, which is what I had suspected for a while, it's been fine. I have no problems at all. I go fairly regularly now. Sometimes I go a few days without, but it's not through constipation. It's just that I haven't eaten a lot over those few days, and I'm just so pleased that whatever I eat digests well. And it's really made a big difference to how I feel as a person, because if you're a bit constipated, you don't feel as well.
Yeah, fair enough. As far as, given that you do have a background as a chef and you probably can make all kinds of things, do you ever you guys ever have like what would you make for Christmas? Or would you have, if you're going to have like a special dinner and you're going to have carnivore, what might it be?
Well, the beauty of carnivore, Shawn, is that it's simple. And we've both found that life is so much simpler. And so our food is simple. I'm not sure what we'll have for Christmas. We're just having Christmas at home this year. We might pull out a couple of really nice steaks with a good inch of fat on the side and have those with, maybe make some pork crackling. We make our own pork crackling here. On my birthday when we were in France, my husband just bought a big steak about this size and presented me with it on my birthday. It was terrific. I like it. I like my steak rare to blue. So it was terrific. And that's about it.
Okay, so entrecôte saignon over in France.
Yes,
maybe.
yes, that's correct. Bleeding.
Very good. Yeah. So as far as, obviously you've got a couple of, obviously living in the rural area, but also competing in these ultra marathon races, running 100 kilometers and whatnot. Have you run into people in that community? I know there's some that do low carb, that practice low carb, ketogenic diets, maybe even a few carnivores out there. Have you run into any of those folks, or are you, again, the odd man out?
There's obviously quite a few out there who do it, but they don't really let on. It's like a secret weapon in a race. It gives you a much better endurance and energy usage in a race than the people who are flagging off on the side after 50 and 60 kilometres. So people tend not to let on that they're low carb or carnivore. You can gather it sometimes from what they say, but yeah, people don't go around and compare what they eat. But I have to actually eat a few carbohydrates in very long races. It's unfortunate. I haven't gotten past that yet. And I think the reasons are that it's sometimes up to 24 hours or more out on course, just exercising. There's no breaks except for an aid station. And I'm using higher energy than I usually use. So I do have to eat a few carbohydrates, unfortunately, maybe 20 to 30 grams an hour if I'm climbing hills or on the flats. And then on the downs, I tend to not eat those items at all. And I also use MCT powder, which is medium chain triglycerides made from coconuts, and it goes directly to my liver and gives my liver good energy. So I use that in the races as my sports drink. It takes me a week to get past and to feel calm and good again on carnivore, unfortunately. I'd like to get to the point where I can do a race completely, either fasted or eating. But you must remember too that all this energy I'm using, I then miss all the meals for those days as well. But I do train completely carnivore, not fasted, but I do train carnivore.
You mentioned the UTMB series, which I understand is a fairly prestigious series. Is there some sort of qualification standard you have to hit to be able to run in those races?
There's a few different ways you have to get into them. You have to register and then go into a ballot, and you have to have done enough races beforehand in their series to get what they call running stones. Once you get enough running stones, you can go into the ballot. The more stones you have, the easier it is to maybe be drawn out of the ballot. But you're competing with 10 to 1 in the ballot. They have that many people apply. I was fortunate this race I've just done in Thailand, and the running stones I earned in that was enough to, if you win your age group, you're invited as an elite to enter. You don't have to go through the ballot. And this year, even though I was only second in my age group, I was invited to go in the ballot to do as an elite entry, so I don't have to go into the ballot. So, and my husband Mick, he won his age group, so he's an elite entry as well. So we're both really pleased about that. We're off to France. We're looking at air tickets right now.
Yeah, the point I was trying to figure out is that you guys are running at a pretty high level. So you're making the elite entry for age groups. You're competing at a high level despite being extremely low carb and mostly carnivore. So that's interesting to see.
For our age group, yes, we are running at an elite level. It's not times compared to the winners. They're probably almost half our times. But at our age group, yes, we are at an elite level.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, there's a gal, she's a medical student, ran a sub 3-hour marathon. Any significant downsides? You mentioned a rash you had at one point. Any ongoing major negatives to this outside of maybe the social things, but physical or health-wise things that you can think of that are negative?
I went through a period of about 2 or 3 months where I had I had diarrhea. It would recur every 3 days or so, and I just couldn't understand why. And what I figured out was I was trying to eat too much fat. I thought I needed fat, and I was eating too much food from before when I needed to eat a lot of food, even on carnivore. So I've had to cut down on the amount of food I eat. I don't eat a lot of extra fat at all with my meals, especially any liquid fat. And I also now take vitamin C. I take it every morning, and that has been enough to completely fix that. But apart from that, carnivore's been the best thing I've ever run across, really.
It's an interesting point. Yeah, I've heard, obviously, that there is a requirement for fat, but you can have too much. And sometimes, like I said, some people have rendered fat, it just runs right through them. And then I have seen a few people comment that vitamin C has been helpful for various gut issues. So that's interesting. I don't think anybody's really running into scurvy issues on carnivore, but for some reason, for some people, that's been helpful. I've seen other people discuss that before. You'd mentioned your physician is generally supportive. Is that right? Is that fair to say? Are they like worried about anything, or what's going on with the physician?
No, actually, my local doctor's great. Of course, when you are a carnivore, you have to shop around for a doctor who's at least happy that you are doing that and will let you do it, rather than giving you long lectures about what's going to happen to you next. So I have a rural doctor, and she's great. In fact, she would never admit to it, but after she saw what happened to me, she went ketogenic herself and lost quite a lot of weight, and she's quite happy. But she can't tell anyone in the surgery that she's done that, including her co-workers and patients. But
why can't you tell people that? What do you think?
Again, I think it's that rural country town thing, and she treats a lot of people around town, and I think she doesn't know enough about it within herself to push that to people as a way of changing things. But I know that she's done it herself with success. So I guess she's at that point. It's a matter of, in a country town, you get to get known, and you don't want to be thought of as a bit crazy by half the people who visit you who are sick. So I guess that's why I've never really talked to her about it. But when we go to Sydney, which we do often, we go to the Sydney Low Carb Specialist Clinic, and I have a doctor there, Dr. Deepa Mananda, and she's been very helpful. She's helped me tweak quite a few things with my keto and then carnivore, and she keeps a very good eye on my blood tests, and she's actually helped me through quite a few things with the blood tests, and now I'm really good. So thank you to Dr. Deepa for that.
Well, very good. And it's good to see that there are more and more physicians. I'm always pleasantly surprised when I don't know how many, I can't imagine, hundreds upon hundreds of physicians that reach out to me that are doing this or want to know more about it. And it's good to see. So more people are taking that up as a potential therapeutic option, because I think it is. Do you, obviously we're doing an interview near, do you do much in the way of social media? Is that something you probably, I suspect you probably don't spend a lot of time there, but maybe you do. I don't know.
No, not at all. Simple life. It's either do everything else I need to do or social media. I'm one of these people who can be quite easily distracted by social media. So my husband Mick does most of that. I do very little. So life's happy that way.
Okay, good. And you said you raise vegetables. Do you guys have any animals yourself, or is it something you have an interest in or can do?
No, we're only on a 1/4 acre block in town. We've had chickens previously, but we travel a lot. We're away for maybe 4 months of the year overseas now in units of maybe 2 months, and I can't really ask the neighbours to look after my chickens anymore, so we had to let them go. And we did have a sheep early on, and we did do that. We have some land out of town, and occasionally we'll go out and we'll shoot a feral goat. We need to remove the goats anyway, but we'll cut that up and put it in the freezer. That's a nice change now and then. But no animals on the property.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, let's see if there's anything else. Well, we've got just a few minutes left. Is there anything else you want to share that I didn't get to ask you?
I'd just like to say to anyone listening who's older or female like myself that it's never too late to go carnivore, and it will bring you such a much better life, however old you are. And as an example, I'd like to tell you about my mother. She's just turning 88 in the next day or two, and she lives alone, and she's always been quite healthy, but she has had sugar things as well, and she has been on a ketogenic carnivore type diet for the last over a year now, and she's just done so fantastically on it. She's dropped any sort of weight, around her middle that she had. Her energy's higher. She seems much more positive when I talk to her on the phone and see her in person, and she's happy with the diet. Now, if she can do that at her age, and we're looking for an exercise physiologist for her now. She walks every day. Then anybody can do carnivore and get good benefit from it. So I just want people to know that, even if they don't want to run ultra marathons, they may just want to go for long walks each day.
Yeah, thank you. Amen to that. Yeah, and I've definitely seen some folks well into their 80s and some even in their 90s that are doing this. So that's wonderful.
Never too late.
Jenny, thanks for that. I appreciate it. Wonderful talking to you.
Thanks, Shawn. Nice to meet you.